Hello everyone and welcome to another video. One of the questions that I've been getting the most recently is whether I can speak about a bit about my settings and which are the most relevant settings in my opinion for AoE4 and to an extent RTS games in general. So I thought it would be useful to make a hopefully not too long video with the most relevant things, right? So first of all, this is not an AoE setting, this is a Windows one. How to get, depending on whether you're using Linux or Windows and the Windows version, you get to hear differently. So, I mean, just by checking the mouse settings you should find this, right? So this is in Spanish, but you will get to hear easily. And there's this like pointer options, and this here it says improve pointer precision. This sounds, I mean, this is too small. I should probably, can I make this bigger or not? Well, hopefully you can read this properly. So it says mejorar la precisión del puntero, improve pointer precision. Make sure you have this unchecked. Like this sounds good, but what this does in fact is it adds acceleration to your mouse, which is a terrible thing when you're playing RTS games because you will often feel like the mouse is moving at different speeds. There's no good use for this in an RTS game. The only thing it will add is a sense of you won't really trust your mouse movements, your accuracy as much as you should, because depending on how fast you move the mouse, the same uh, the same the same distance will make a different move, right? So this is terrible. I think this is useful for, I think some FPS games, like for instance Quake, I think they need acceleration. But as an RTS player, I would highly recommend that you have this unchecked and that you keep this on 6 or of 11 as well. But for real, make sure you have this unchecked. It has happened to me a few times that I go to a tournament, an offline tournament. I do all my Age of Empires 4 settings, but the mouse still feels wrong. Like I cannot exactly tell what it is, but it just feels wrong, right? Until eventually I remember about this setting and I'm because for some reason it's checked by default. So yeah, definitely make sure you uncheck this, right? That's the only out of Age of Empires 4 setting that I highly recommend you change now. And since I've been asked about my control groups, I guess I can show everything, go a bit through all of these and talk about which are the most important ones to me. As you may see, a lot of them I haven't even binded, right? Like I'm not really using them. This one is maybe probably useful, but not really necessary, but you can probably use this one. Yeah, in this first section, there's not that much to see. Uh, these ones I don't really use anymore. Tab for sure I use. It's really important being able to tap through your units and so on. Even though generally I try to group units by type, right? So it's really rare that I have the same, well, not so much by type. So usually I have three control groups for army, and it's melee infantry, range infantry, and cavalry, right? Three different control groups. And then I usually have another one for siege and stuff like that. So usually four control groups for units is, I think, optimal. More than that, you can go for, but it becomes really hard to use. Select all idle villagers. This is one of the most important ones. One of the ones I use the most. You need a quick way to select all your idle villagers so you can put them to work or ungarrison them or send them back to war, whatever. This is really useful. If you're not using these, you probably should get used to it. This one I'm not really using, and this one neither. Although this may be useful as well, but I don't really use this one. Cycle through idle military units. Yeah, I don't use this one. This one is really important. I use this one a lot. Select all idle military units. I have another video where I explain in detail how I combine this with patrol to make sure I select all the unused units while still not selecting the ones I left in purpose to defend certain locations. So if you want to go deep into that, it's my first video on the channel, right? The 5 tips to make your life easier playing before. There I go into detail of how I'm using this. This one I don't use. I even recommend that you can unbind this. Replace it with this one. This one is really valuable. This one in the long run it will be annoying. You will always move units that you don't want to move and so on. The only legit use for this hotkey is to set up your control groups. Well, this one I use. I mean, it's kind of useful, especially as ruse, but not the biggest deals. This one is also, I think, especially with Delhi, it's very useful. These ones I use sometimes. They are not the most important thing. If you really don't want to use these hotkeys, I don't think it's a big deal, but I use them from time to time. Okay, now here. This one I use this one. Like for instance, when I play as Delhi, it's very easy for me. Like the second you age up, you press F2 and you start spamming keys, right? Like queuing every single upgrade and tabbing through the different economic buildings. This one I don't really use, but I know especially for people coming from AoE2 is really useful. I don't have anything against it, but I do these things differently. Like I use, as we will see later, camera hotkeys to go to my bases and so on. Uh, these ones I really don't use at all. These ones I don't use because I use control groups for this. So I have my barracks in 4, or my archery ranges in 5, or my stables in 6. I'm not too against them. My TC is on 7. If you want to do it this way instead of setting up the control groups, it's fine. There's some instances where I don't like it because you lose a bit of like let's say I have 10 archery ranges and 3 of them are my opponent has a keep over them. How do I like if I use control groups I can just unbind those 3 and produce from the 7 safe ones, right? If you're using these hotkeys, it can be a bit tricky. But I mean, if you want to, it's a very specific issue, right? In very rare occasions. These ones I use. I mean, it has the same issue than before. Like ideally, I would use control groups, but I just don't have enough control groups. Like I'm reducing the only 10 I can bind, right? So yeah, these ones I use. This can be useful as Delhi, but I don't do it because there's actually a trick where if you put in a control group a TC and then the keeps, you can produce villagers from all of the buildings with your produce villager hotkey, right? So I don't use this at all. Then blacksmith I have on 0. I use this quite often, and these two as well. Kind of strange because I use this, but I don't have the equivalents, right, for lumber camps and mining camps. But yeah, I think this can be useful to queue upgrades and so on. Select all dogs. I don't use this. I use a control group for them. The markets I use with them. This is very smooth to just trade resources, right? And when you're trading to produce traders as well. And then the other ones I'm not using them. This maybe I could have on B, right? Because Mongol doesn't have meals or hunting cabins or anything like that, so I think I'm gonna do this. Yeah, it says it's a conflict, but in reality it's not, right? Because it's not possible to have a gear and a meal at the same time. So let's do that. Now control groups. Let's go to the beginning. 1 to 9, and then the 0 I have on Mayus on the left side of my keyboard. I feel like 0 is too far away. So when a control group is really far away from my hand, I just bind there things that I don't use too often. Like for instance, the blacksmith UQ upgrades like I don't know 5, 6 times in during the game, 7, 8, whatever. But it's really rare, right? As opposed to selecting your cavalry, which you are doing pretty much 1,000 times per game. So yes, a rule of thumb: the more you use something, not necessarily the closest to your hand, but just the easiest for you to press that hotkey, right? In the long run, it makes a difference. Now these ones, I use them as well, like focusing on selection by pressing twice the number. Not the biggest of deals, but yeah, kind of useful. Especially because sometimes it's hard for me to know how this works precisely. Like sometimes I will add a unit to a control group and I have like 15 units in total, and it will focus in the one I just added, right? Which is not what I want. So these ones are a bit. I use them, but sometimes I feel it may feel like kind of annoying. And this is obviously for setting the control groups. These ones are very useful, but I don't use them, I have to admit. It's something that I should have gotten used to by now, like from StarCraft 2 or even Warcraft 3, but I do it in a more rudimentary way. I press 1, and then I press Shift, and then I select the units I want to add, and I rebind the control group, right? So if you want to make the effort, I think you should get used to this. It's one of those bad habits that I know that are hindering me, but I still haven't gotten rid enough, right? Maybe I should try to, and though it's been more than a decade, but yeah. I think I got used to doing it the other way because at the beginning in Warcraft you didn't have this utility, right? So, and then these ones are kind of useful as well. Removing units from a control group. I use what is it called? Exclusive control groups. So I do this a bit differently by adding them to uh, Majus, the trash control group, so to speak, for me. So I do it that way to remove them. But this is probably even better, right? Yeah. So I mean communication. Who cares? And then camera. Oh, let's see what's here. This I don't really use. No, I do use this. Sorry, especially when you are. So I like to shift my wood villagers so they always go to the trees closer to the lumber camp. So sometimes you have to move a bit the camera to actually click them precisely, right? So I use this in a few instances. Uh, I use camera locations. I go into detail if you're interested in why and how to set them properly. I go into detail about this in my first video on the channel, the 5 tips to make your life easier playing AoE4. So if you're interested in that, I, I suggest you take a look at that, right? I have 6 bound, but in reality, it depends on the map. Like for instance, let's say Kawasan. I think it's really useful to have one in each of the ponds because most of the action is there. So you need a quick way to get there, right? In other maps, I just put them in my town centers. Depends a bit. Uh, I think it's useful. I don't think, like for instance, in StarCraft 2, I think you need to use this. In AoE4, I don't think it's as relevant because the lethality isn't that high, right? Like reacting 3 seconds or not 3 seconds, 1 second slower to something because you have to click the minimap instead of a hotkey is not the end of the world. So yeah, that's it. Went a bit through all my settings. If I went too fast in some, you can always, of course, slow down the video or go back and so on. Hopefully this, wait. There's a few more, right? I almost forgot. So yeah, I don't use sticky selection. I do use exclusive control groups. These are pretty much the standard ones, right? I'm just going through them. So if you're interested, you can copy it or check. Maybe some you don't know why I use. So make sure to ask in the comments if I don't answer your specific question during the video. And this is really annoying when you're playing. So if you're not a beginner or someone who's starting, make sure this is off. This one is interesting. I put it on gathering so I can, like, let's say I'm gathering stone. I can just shift click my villagers to build another mining camp, and they will finish the entire thing, right? I like knowing the game timer because depending on the timing, I can know whether my opponent has done something or not and stuff like that, right? When you have a good understanding of the game, you can, at this timing he can have done this, he cannot have done that, and so on and so forth. I mean, why not? Let's check these. Okay, so that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed this and hopefully it was useful. Again, especially the first one, the enhanced pointer precision from Windows, I really suggest you remove that one. So yep, thanks everyone for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video and see you next time. Bye bye.